In this video, I'm going to spend a few moments talking about two simple questions that will help you apply coaching as a form of helping. So it would be really, really easy for me to make this overcomplicated. I'm going to do my best to keep it as simple as I can. And I'm also going to include an example at the end so you can see how this might work in practice. So the two questions I want you to think about when it comes to coaching. First is, what do you want? Sounds simple. Oftentimes we forget to ask ourselves that question because often we focus our attention on the problem, our stuckness, the pain that's involved in our current situation, and we lose sight of what it is that we actually want. Now, we can actually use that question to drill in a little bit further. There's ways that we can engage with people to go behind that question. And instead of asking what is it that you want, we can figure out what is it that you really want by having this first thing. But we're going to leave that aside for now. So the first question is, what is it that you want? Why is that question important? It actually orients ourselves towards a specific goal or a specific outcome that this person wants to get to. It's the point B to our point A. Right? So that's the first step. The second step is to ask this person, well, what's getting in the way of you getting this thing that you say that you want? Now, when we ask that question, invariably what's going to happen is we're going to surface ways that this person is perceiving their current situation. We're going to uncover the thoughts that they're having, the beliefs that are maybe generating some of those thoughts, the mental models they're applying, the assumptions that they're using, and perhaps we're also going to understand a little bit better their emotional state as they're finding themselves stuck in this current situation. Our job as coaches is to get really, really curious about whatever this person's saying after we ask that question of what's getting in the way. Because what it's going to do is they're going to share information with us, which reveals their way of experiencing reality. And the more we can understand their way of experiencing reality, the more we can tune ourselves into, well, maybe we're seeing how this person is actually getting in their own way. And then the more we can identify the pattern, perhaps the unconscious pattern that's playing out for them, we can help them gain more awareness into that. And then they can create conscious choice around that pattern. Maybe they'll choose a different path. So I'll give you a real life example. This is actually coming out of a session I had with a client earlier this morning that I hope illustrates the point. So my client is somebody who often finds themselves stuck in thinking mode versus doing mode. What he describes it as is he goes on these sort of endless loops of planning how to achieve a certain goal or to be more productive. And in part of that, they try to find the most awesome productivity system. And then they try to make sure that that's optimal and that they're finding the very best one. And what they noticed in that pattern is that they often prevent themselves from actually taking action on the tasks because he's spending his time trying to make sure his system is perfect. And if it's not perfect, then he's going to find a better one and yet a better one and yet a better one. So he's got like this sort of inner optimizer in him. And he recognizes that the optimizer in him is sort of getting in the way of him taking action. Now, we identified that what he wanted was to take more action, was to be more productive and actually get more things done. What we both agreed on was part of what was getting in the way was his incessant need for optimizing and for finding these perfect systems. Now, as I was getting curious about this with him, what we started to realize was that incessant need to get it perfect was connected with this challenge that he has with failure and making mistakes. So what he had told me was, well, part of what he's doing when he's trying to find the perfect system is to make sure that there's no room for error. And so as I was getting curious about his relationship with making mistakes, what he revealed was when he makes a mistake, he actually feels really, really enraged. And I was like, oh, wow. Mad. He gets really mad about mad at himself when he makes a mistake. So I got a little bit more curious about that. I was like, well, what's that doing for you? What's the goal of getting mad at yourself in that case? And then as he was really sitting with that question, he started to realize, well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that when he realizes that he's made a mistake, he feels really shameful. He experiences a lot of fear. And you drill in a little bit further, he actually said that if he makes a mistake, it means that he's not very smart. And being very smart was really important to him. Being smart was part of his core identity. And so what we recognized was getting angry at himself was somewhat of a coping mechanism with the threat of the possibility that he might not be very smart. Now, I don't think he's not smart or that he's dumb, but there's a very real fear that he's experiencing in that moment that's preventing him from taking action. Some of you might even be familiar with this pattern that we're describing, right? Perfectionism, because we are really afraid of the possibility that we might be wrong. Now, I could go and say, well, look, you're dealing with perfectionism, and I think what you need to do is realize that this is a growth mindset thing, and mistakes and errors are just opportunities for us to learn and grow, and they don't actually mean anything about you per se. I could say that, but I actually took a little bit of a different route with him, where we started to play with the fact that there's a part of him that feels insecure about how smart he is, and there's also another part of him that's really trying to protect himself through that anger and that rage, right? It's a sort of a way of him like misdirecting his energy and emotion by focusing on rage as a way to avoid the feeling of fear and shame that he was experiencing by making mistakes. So part of what we talked about was developing some practices where he could gain more awareness when those parts of himself were coming out, the rage and also maybe some of the fear and the shame. And so by recognizing that those were some of his patterns, he could start to develop a different relationship with those patterns. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what I mean when I describe this combination of what is it that you want and what's getting in the way of you achieving or having that thing that you say that you want. In my client's case, what he wants is to be more productive and to get more things done. What he recognized was that he has these emotional patterns of shame and fear and also anger as sort of a counterbalance that are all ways to avoid the feeling that he's not very smart. And there's a lot to unpack there, of course. There's much, much more to go into there, but that is hopefully a good illustration of getting curious about a person, understanding what their pattern of stuckness might be, and for us as coaches to hold a curious stance to see what other possibility might be available to them if they just recognized what some of those patterns are and seeing that there's maybe a different way they can relate to those.